The oldest known dress in the world, the Tarkan dress, dates back over 5,000 years, predating the first dynasty of ancient Egypt by centuries, and yet it was unearthed in a tomb, a testament to the meticulous care given to even the garments intended for eternity in a land obsessed with the passage beyond. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through the hushed corridors of time. A passage into a world woven from desert sands, shimmering moonlight, and the timeless whisper of the great Nile. As the evening deepens and shadows lengthen, I invite you to find your most comfortable sanctuary, to gently recline, and to allow a soft, cleansing breath to fill your lungs, then slowly, peacefully release it. Feel the quiet stillness settle around you, embracing you like a comforting shawl. Tonight, we shall drift together, carried by the currents of ancient memory, to a land where colossal monuments touched the heavens, where gods walked among mortals, and where the sun-kissed sands held secrets of an empire that echoed through millennia. We travel through time, to the land where the Nile whispered under moonlight, where the very air was imbued with a sense of the sacred, and where the heartbeat of a civilization was tied to the rhythm of a life-giving river. Before we embark on this tranquil voyage, a gentle invitation if you feel so inclined. A quiet like or a soft subscribe to our channel helps us to continue crafting these peaceful stories, allowing more souls to find solace and rest in the embrace of history's gentle echoes. Your quiet support ensures that the whispers of the past can continue to lull us into dreamland. Now, let us begin our journey, letting go of the day's concerns, surrendering to the quiet narrative unfolding. We cast our minds back far beyond the clamor of modern times, to a period when the very concept of kingship was taking root in the fertile crescent of humanity's imagination. Before the grand titles of Pharaoh, before the towering pyramids pierced the sky, there was a land, a ribbon of vibrant green, cradled between vast golden deserts. This was Kemet, the Black Land, so named for the rich. Dark silt deposited annually by the benevolent inundation of the Nile. In these nascent epochs, scattered communities thrived along the riverbanks, their lives synchronized with the river's ebb and flow. They were simple folk, farmers and fishermen, their existence a delicate dance with nature's rhythms. Their leaders were local chieftains, respected elders, perhaps wise men who understood the river's moods and the constellations' dance. They cultivated barley and emmer wheat, fished the Nile's bounty, and crafted tools from stone and copper. The nights were vast and silent, filled with the murmuring of insects and the distant calls of unseen creatures, while overhead the stars shone with an intensity we rarely witness today, guiding lights in a world yet undefined by grand structures. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, these small settlements began to coalesce, perhaps driven by the need for cooperative irrigation projects, perhaps by the desire for shared protection against the harsh desert or rival groups. Villages grew into towns, and towns into small kingdoms. Two distinct realms began to emerge, each with its own customs, its own symbolic animals, and its own proto-royal lineage. To the south, where the Nile carved its path through a narrower valley, lay Upper Egypt, symbolized by the white crown and the lotus flower, guarded by the vulture goddess Nekhbet. To the north, stretching into the broad delta, was Lower Egypt, represented by the red crown and the papyrus plant, protected by the cobra goddess Wadjet. The air during these times was thick with nascent belief, with a profound connection to the natural world. Every sunrise was a rebirth, every sunset a descent into the underworld. The Nile was not merely a river, it was the very artery of existence, a divine gift that brought life from the parched earth. The desert, while dangerous and mysterious, was also the domain of the gods, a place of profound silence and infinite solitude. These early Egyptians observed the stars, tracked the sun's journey, and understood the cyclical nature of life, death and regeneration, concepts that would become fundamental pillars of their civilization. The idea of a single ruler, a figure capable of uniting these disparate lands, slowly began to take shape. Legends speak of a king, often identified as Nama or Menes, who, through wisdom or conquest, brought the two lands together. Imagine the weight of such an ambition, the slow, steady forging of a nation from scattered tribes. The unification was not a swift, dramatic event, but a gradual process, likely spanning generations, marked by shifting alliances, occasional skirmishes, and the steady intertwining of cultures and beliefs. The Nama palette, a ceremonial shield-shaped slab of carved siltstone, offers a vivid, if symbolic, glimpse into this pivotal moment. On one side, Nama, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, is depicted smiting a foe, while on the other, wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, he surveys his conquered enemies. It is a quiet testament to the birth of a unified kingdom, an emblem of a new era. With unification came stability, and with stability, cue the fertile ground for cultural flourishing. The capital was established at Memphis, a strategic point where Upper and Lower Egypt met, a city whose very name, White Walls, suggested purity and power. Here, the first true pharaohs, as we would come to know them, began to establish the foundations of a centralized state, a complex bureaucracy, and a sophisticated religious system that would endure for millennia. The king was no longer merely a chieftain. He was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, a living god, the link between the mortal realm and the divine. This concept, profound and pervasive, shaped every aspect of Egyptian life, giving the pharaoh an authority that was absolute, sacred, and deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness. The early dynasties, spanning from approximately 3100 to 2686 BCE, are often referred to as the early dynastic period. During this time, the seeds of monumental architecture were sown. Though the colossal pyramids were yet to rise, royal tombs at Abydos and Saqqara began to grow in scale and complexity, evolving from simple mastabas, rectangular flat-topped mounds, into more elaborate structures. These tombs were not just burial places, they were eternal homes, meticulously prepared for the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife, designed to ensure his successful rebirth and continued sustenance in the realm of Osiris. The belief in a vibrant afterlife, a continuation of earthly existence but perfected, was a driving force behind much of Egyptian civilization, informing their art, their architecture, and their daily rituals. As the sun gently sets over these distant early years, imagine the quiet murmur of construction in the desert, the slow, rhythmic chipping of stone, the soft shuffle of sandaled feet. The air would have carried the scent of dust and damp river earth, a faint perfume of incantations drifting from newly consecrated temples. The world was unfolding, one careful, deliberate step at a time, guided by the steadfast belief in divine order and the unwavering power of their living God-King. The bedrock of an empire, both literal and spiritual, was being laid, stone by silent stone, under the watchful gaze of the desert stars. It was a time of quiet innovation, of steady consolidation, laying the groundwork for the breathtaking achievements that were yet to come, a prelude to the age of giants. Then came the dawn of the Old Kingdom, a period often called the Age of Pyramids, a monumental chapter in human history that began around 26 and 86 BCE and lasted for approximately 500 years. This era represents an astonishing leap in human ingenuity, organization, and spiritual ambition. The pharaohs of this time were not content with simple mastabas. Their aspirations soared towards the heavens, seeking to create eternal monuments that would not only house their earthly remains, but also serve as cosmic ladders, enabling their souls to ascend and join the gods. The first architect of this grand vision was Imhotep, vizier to Pharaoh Djoser of the Third Dynasty. Imhotep, a figure of almost mythical intellect, was not only a chief minister but also a high priest, physician and engineer. His brilliance gave birth to the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, a revolutionary structure that shattered previous architectural norms. Imagine for a moment the sheer audacity of the concept, stacking mastabas one upon another, reaching 6 distinct levels towards the sky, encased in gleaming white limestone. It was a structure unlike anything the world had ever seen, a mountain of stone rising from the flat desert floor, a testament to Djoser's divine authority and Imhotep's unparalleled genius. The construction would have been a colossal undertaking, involving thousands of laborers, meticulous planning, and an understanding of engineering principles that seems almost miraculous for its time. The sounds would have been those of chisels on stone, the rhythmic chanting of workers, the creak of wooden levers, and the constant soft sigh of the desert wind. The Step Pyramid was more than just a tomb. It was an entire complex, a mortuary city designed for Djoser's eternal journey. Within its walls lay courtyards, temples, and ritualistic spaces, all crafted to facilitate the pharaoh's transition and ensure the continued prosperity of Egypt. The precision of the stonework, the sheer scale of the project, all whispered of a society capable of extraordinary coordination and unwavering faith. It was a quiet revolution in stone, a declaration of intent that would resonate for millennia. Following Djoser, the Fourth Dynasty Pharaoh Sneferu, often considered the greatest builder of the Old Kingdom, refined and perfected the pyramid form. His reign was a period of intense experimentation. He constructed 3 major pyramids, each a step closer to the iconic smooth-sided pyramid we recognize today. The first, the pyramid at Meidum, began as a step pyramid but was later converted into a true pyramid, though its outer casing ultimately collapsed. Then came the bent pyramid at Dashur, a fascinating architectural puzzle. Its angle of incline suddenly changes midway up, perhaps due to structural concerns or a shift in design. This anomaly gives it a unique, almost ethereal appearance, as if frozen in a moment of transformation. Finally, Sneferu achieved his masterpiece, the Red Pyramid, also at Dashur. This was the first true smooth-sided pyramid, a testament to perfected technique and unwavering ambition. Its reddish hue, derived from the limestone used, would have glowed magnificently in the desert sun, a beacon of royal power and divine aspiration. These pyramids were not built by slaves, as often popularly depicted, but by skilled craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal workers, likely farmers who contributed their labor during the Nile's annual inundation when agricultural work was impossible. They were organized into highly structured teams, fed and housed, working with purpose and pride for their divine king, ensuring his successful passage to the afterlife, which in turn guaranteed the prosperity of all Egypt. The logistics were astounding, quarrying vast blocks of stone from distant sites, transporting them across the desert and the Nile, and then meticulously raising them into place using ramps, levers, and sheer human will. Imagine the quiet camaraderie, the shared effort, the profound sense of participating in something truly immortal. Sneferu's son, Khufu, then ascended the throne, and under his reign, the Great Pyramid of Giza was conceived and constructed. This monumental achievement, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still largely intact, stands as an enduring symbol of ancient Egypt's power and ingenuity. For nearly 4 millennia, it remained the tallest man-made structure on Earth. To stand before it, even in imagination, is to feel a profound sense of awe. Imagine its dazzling white limestone casing, now largely gone, reflecting the desert sun, a luminous beacon visible for miles, a truly breathtaking sight. The sheer scale of Khufu's pyramid is almost incomprehensible, composed of approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, some much heavier. It stands as a testament to the organizational genius of the Old Kingdom. The internal chambers, the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and the subterranean chamber were not merely functional spaces, but sacred precincts, carefully aligned with astronomical precision. The Great Pyramid was not simply a tomb, it was a complex astronomical observatory, a geological marvel, and a spiritual engine designed to launch the pharaoh's soul into the celestial realm, ensuring the enduring order of the cosmos and the continued well-being of his people. Adjacent to Khufu's pyramid stand those of his son Khafre and grandson Menkaure. Khafre's pyramid, though slightly smaller than Khufu's, appears taller due to its elevated position on the Giza plateau and still retains some of its original polished limestone casing near the apex, a shimmering glimpse of its former glory. Guarding Khafre's mortuary temple and his pyramid is the Great Sphinx, a colossal limestone statue with the body of a lion and the head of a man, likely a representation of Khafre himself, gazing eastward towards the rising sun. A silent sentinel watching over the eternal sleep of the pharaohs. The Sphinx's enigmatic expression, weathered by millennia of desert winds, seems to hold the very secrets of time within its stone gaze. Menkaure's pyramid, the smallest of the three main pyramids at Giza, is distinguished by its lower courses of red Aswan granite, a striking contrast to the white limestone. It speaks of a subtle shift in resources, or perhaps a preference for aesthetics. The entire Giza complex, with its pyramids, temples, causeways, and satellite tombs for queens and high officials, represents a carefully planned, integrated sacred landscape, a necropolis designed for eternity. The silence of Giza at night, under the vast expanse of stars, must have been profound, broken only by the whispers of the desert wind carrying echoes of ancient prayers. Life during the Old Kingdom revolved around the pharaoh, the Nile, and the cycle of seasons. The royal court was the center of power, bustling with scribes, priests, administrators, and artisans. Daily life for most Egyptians, however, was simpler, connected to the fertile soil. They lived in mud-brick homes, ate bread and beer, and worked the land, their lives dictated by the annual flood. Yet even in their daily existence, there was a deep spiritual current. The world was alive with gods and goddesses, unseen forces that shaped their destiny. Offerings were made, rituals performed, and prayers whispered to ensure balance, known as Ma'at, the cosmic order. The art of the Old Kingdom reflected this reverence for order and eternity. Statues depicted pharaohs and nobles in serene, idealized forms meant to convey timeless power and divine calm. Relief carvings adorned temple walls and tombs, illustrating daily life, religious ceremonies, and the pharaoh's triumphant journey through the afterlife, all rendered with meticulous detail and a quiet elegance. The colors, now faded by time, would have been vibrant, telling stories in silent hues. These images were not merely decorative, they were functional, designed to magically ensure the continued existence and well-being of the deceased in the spirit world. As the Old Kingdom drew to a close, around 2181 BCE, the immense power of the central government began to wane. The vast expenditures on pyramid building, the increasing wealth and influence of provincial governors, nomarchs, and a succession of less effective pharaohs gradually chipped away at the pharaoh's absolute authority. The long reigns of powerful rulers like Pepi II, who ruled for an astonishing 94 years, may have paradoxically contributed to this decline, as the central administration became stagnant and local power bases grew unchecked. The cosmic order, Ma'at, seemed to subtly shift. The last centuries of the Old Kingdom were marked by a slow decentralization. Imagine the distant hum of the central authority gradually fading, replaced by the rising distinctiveness of regional dialects and local loyalties. Nomarchs, who once owed absolute fealty to the pharaoh, began to view their positions as hereditary, building their own elaborate tombs and accumulating resources. This gradual erosion of royal power eventually led to a period of fragmentation, a time when the unified realm fractured into smaller, independent polities, often vying for control. The gentle rhythm of the Old Kingdom, so long unwavering, slowly gave way to a more uncertain beat, a soft, melancholy note foreshadowing a time of transition. The age of the colossal pyramids, those silent witnesses to unparalleled power, began to draw to a close, leaving behind a legacy of stone and shadow, waiting for the next great rise. The Old Kingdom's majestic unity eventually dissolved into what historians term the First Intermediate Period, a time of relative decentralization and political fragmentation that lasted for about 150 years, from roughly 2181 to 2055 BCE. Imagine the quiet unraveling of a tightly woven tapestry, threads loosening, patterns becoming less distinct. The absolute power of the pharaoh, once the unquestioned pivot of the cosmos, receded like the desert mirage, leaving behind a landscape where local governors, known as nomarchs, wielded increasing authority in their respective regions. With the central government at Memphis weakened, the unified command structure that had built the pyramids faltered. Communication between distant nomes or provinces became less reliable. The vast projects that once consumed national resources, uniting the population in common purpose, ceased. Instead, resources were redirected to local concerns, local temples, and local tombs for the nomarchs themselves. This period was not necessarily one of widespread chaos or constant warfare, but rather a slow, quiet drift apart, a nuanced shifting of power that led to a patchwork of smaller independent states. The Nile, that eternal lifeline, still brought its annual flood, ensuring sustenance, but the coordinated management of irrigation systems, once overseen by the central administration, may have suffered. Local autonomy brought with it local rivalries, and while large-scale conflicts were perhaps not constant, localized skirmishes and tensions likely simmered, subtly disturbing the peaceful flow of life along the river. The sense of universal order, Ma'at, became less distinct, more localized, creating a subtle disquiet in the collective consciousness. Art and architecture during this period reflected the shift in patronage. Instead of grand royal monuments, there was a flourishing of local styles, less rigid and more expressive, though perhaps not as technically refined as the Old Kingdom masterpieces. Tomb decorations focused on the daily lives of the nomarchs, their families, and the activities of their estates, rather than solely on the divine pharaoh. This era offers a fascinating glimpse into the lives of the provincial elite, providing a more diverse and personal window into ancient Egyptian society. The emphasis moved from the grand universal narratives of the gods and the pharaoh to the more intimate earthly concerns of individual powerful families. Despite the political fragmentation, the fundamental cultural and religious beliefs of Egypt endured. The reverence for the Nile, the belief in the afterlife, the pantheon of gods, these remained deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. The people still performed their rituals, offered their prayers, and hoped for a prosperous eternity. The quiet strength of Egyptian identity persisted, even as its political expression became diffused. It was a time of introspection and resilience, a subtle recalibration of societal structures. As the First Intermediate Period progressed, two major centers of power gradually emerged, vying for dominance. In the north, a line of rulers based in Heracleopolis Magna claimed the pharaonic title, attempting to maintain the traditions of the Old Kingdom. In the south, a powerful and ambitious family arose in Thebes, steadily gaining control over a growing number of southern nomes. The rulers of Thebes, initially local potentates, began to envision a unified Egypt once more, recognizing that only through consolidation could true stability and prosperity return. The eventual reunification of Egypt would fall to the Theban 11th dynasty. Mentuhotep II, a formidable and visionary ruler, spearheaded this effort. Imagine the patient, strategic work required, forging alliances, engaging in diplomatic overtures, and when necessary, deploying military force. His campaigns were not necessarily grand, loud battles, but rather a slow, steady reclaiming of territory, a methodical bringing together of disparate elements under a single, strong hand. The sounds of distant skirmishes would have punctuated the quiet landscape, but the overarching narrative was one of a quiet, determined will to restore order. Around 2055 BCE, Mentuhotep II finally succeeded in around 2055 BCE, Mentuhotep II finally succeeded in reuniting the two lands, once again bringing the disparate regions of Egypt under a single authoritative rule. This marked the quiet, yet profound, dawn of the Middle Kingdom, a period stretching from approximately 2055 to 1650 BCE, often hailed as the classical age of ancient Egypt. It was a time not only of political restoration, but also of a cultural and artistic renaissance, where the lessons learned from the fragmentation of the first intermediate period led to a more nuanced, perhaps even more human, approach to kingship and governance. The capital was re-established, not at the ancient site of Memphis, but in Thebes, a city that had risen to prominence during the struggle for reunification. Thebes, with its majestic temples and burgeoning necropolises on the West Bank, would become a spiritual and administrative heartland for centuries to come, laying the groundwork for its later unrivaled glory. Mentuhotep II's reign was a quiet act of healing, a steady hand guiding a fractured nation back to coherence. His mortuary complex at Deir el-Bahari, though later overshadowed by Hatshepsut's grander temple, stands as a testament to this reunification, a unique terraced structure blending rock-cut tombs with a traditional temple, symbolizing a new era that respected the old while daring to innovate. Its quiet grandeur reflects a more introspective, perhaps even slightly less absolutist, pharaonic image than the towering monuments of the Old Kingdom. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, particularly those of the 12th dynasty, embraced a different kind of kingship. While still divine, their portrayal in art often showed them as more human, even burdened, reflecting the responsibilities and anxieties of governing. Their faces, carved in stone, sometimes bore expressions of weariness or thoughtful determination, a subtle departure from the serene, idealized countenances of the Old Kingdom rulers. This shift hinted at a more complex understanding of leadership, one where the king was not just a god, but also a protector and shepherd of his people, deeply invested in their welfare. The concept of Ma'at remained central, but its enforcement now felt less like an automatic divine right and more like a conscious, diligent effort by the monarch. One of the defining features of the Middle Kingdom was the expansion of the afterlife concept beyond the exclusive domain of the pharaoh and high elite. The belief in a personalized judgment and a joyous eternal existence, once largely confined to royalty, gradually democratized. Ordinary Egyptians, those working the fields or crafting goods, now also aspired to and prepared for a glorious afterlife. This shift is beautifully evidenced by the proliferation of coffin texts, spells and incantations inscribed on wooden coffins, designed to guide the deceased through the dangers of the underworld and ensure their rebirth. These texts, accessible to a broader segment of society, represented a quiet yet profound spiritual revolution, offering solace and hope to countless individuals. Literature flourished during this era, achieving a sophistication and depth that established many works as classics for millennia. Stories like The Story of Sinu, a poignant tale of an exiled Egyptian noble's adventures and eventual return home, or The Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor, spoke of adventure, resilience, and the quiet contemplation of life's uncertainties. Wisdom literature, offering moral guidance and practical advice on living a virtuous life, also gained prominence. These literary endeavors provided a gentle mirror for the human condition, offering insights into personal struggles, ethics, and the quest for meaning in a complex world. The language itself, Middle Egyptian, became the classical form, a language that scribes would study and emulate for centuries. Economically, the Middle Kingdom saw significant investment in public works, particularly in the Fayum Oasis, a vast depression west of the Nile. Pharaohs like Amenemhat III undertook colossal irrigation projects, digging canals and constructing dams to reclaim arable land and enhance agricultural productivity. This quiet strategic engineering transformed the Fayum into a fertile breadbasket, demonstrating a proactive approach to national prosperity that directly benefited the common people. Such projects, while not as visually spectacular as pyramids, represent a profound commitment to the sustained well-being of the realm, a quiet act of foresight that ensured a stable food supply and economic growth. The military, too, saw a quiet transformation. While not aggressively expansionist in the manner of later empires, the Middle Kingdom established a more professional army and built defensive fortresses along the southern frontier in Nubia, particularly during the reign of Senusret III. These forts, formidable and strategically placed, protected Egypt's access to vital gold mines and trade routes, demonstrating a pragmatic awareness of external threats and the importance of resource security. The quiet discipline of the soldiers, the methodical construction of these bastions, all spoke of a kingdom that had learned the hard lessons of fragmentation and was determined to safeguard its renewed unity. Art and architecture, while maintaining the grandeur of the old kingdom, also evolved. Temples grew in complexity, often incorporating hypostyle halls, vast rooms with many columns and more intricate relief carvings. Statuary, as mentioned, subtly shifted, depicting pharaohs with more individualized features and sometimes a brooding intensity. Yet the underlying principles of proportion, balance and symbolism remained paramount, creating a timeless aesthetic that continued to inspire awe. The quiet precision of the sculptors, the painters, and the stone masons continued to imbue their creations with a sense of the eternal, even as the expressions became more nuanced. For the ordinary Egyptian, life continued its rhythm along the Nile. The quiet routine of farming, fishing, and craftsmanship remained central. Mud brick homes clustered along the riverbanks, markets bustled with trade, and the annual inundation continued to dictate the pace of life. Yet for many, the Middle Kingdom brought a renewed sense of stability and prosperity, a quiet confidence in the benevolent rule of their pharaoh, and the enduring order of Mat. The accessibility of the afterlife, too, offered a deep spiritual comfort, weaving a richer tapestry of meaning into their daily lives. However, even this era of classical flourishing was not destined for eternal tranquility. As the 12th dynasty drew to a close, a quiet decline began to set in, mirroring in some ways the erosion of power that preceded the first intermediate period. A succession of less effective rulers, combined with the increasing influence of powerful provincial families and a growing influx of foreign settlers into the Delta region, gradually weakened the central authority. The once robust system of governance began to fray at the edges, a subtle shift in the balance of power that, though imperceptible at first, would eventually lead to another period of fragmentation. The 13th dynasty, following the powerful 12th, saw a rapid succession of short-lived pharaohs, indicating instability at the heart of the kingdom. The grand vision of the unified state began to dim, replaced by a more localized focus. The quiet confidence of the classical age slowly gave way to an underlying unease, a sense of an empire gently swaying under mounting pressures. The influx of foreign peoples, particularly from the Near East, who had long settled in the eastern delta, began to exert a more significant influence, eventually leading to their quiet ascendancy. This gradual weakening of the central authority eventually ushered in the Second Intermediate Period, a tumultuous era that began around 1650 BCE. It was a time of political fragmentation and foreign domination, marked most significantly by the rise of the Hyksos. These rulers of foreign lands, a Semitic people who had migrated into the delta, gradually consolidated their power, establishing their own dynasty and ruling over Lower Egypt for approximately a century. Their capital at Avaris, a bustling city in the eastern delta, became a center of foreign culture and trade. Imagine the quiet apprehension of the native Egyptians as these foreign rulers, speaking a different language and bringing different customs, asserted their dominion. While the Hyksos adopted many Egyptian traditions, including pharaonic titles and aspects of Egyptian religion, their presence represented a profound challenge to the traditional notion of Egyptian sovereignty. They introduced new technologies, such as the composite bow, more advanced chariots, and bronze weaponry, forever changing the face of Egyptian warfare. This period was not one of complete destruction, but rather a quiet, uneasy coexistence, a blurring of cultural lines in the fertile delta. During this time, the native Egyptian pharaohs retreated to their traditional stronghold in Upper Egypt, establishing their power base in Thebes once more. They ruled concurrently with the Hyksos, maintaining a fragile independence in the south. This created a dualistic Egypt, divided between foreign rule in the north and native Egyptian rule in the south. The rulers in Thebes, though limited in their immediate power, nurtured a fierce sense of national identity and a deep desire to expel the foreign invaders and reunite the two lands once again. The quiet determination to restore Mayat and reassert Egyptian sovereignty began to simmer in the temples and palaces of Thebes. The narrative of the Second Intermediate Period is one of tension and simmering resentment, a quiet anticipation of the inevitable clash. The Theban princes, members of the 17th dynasty, gradually began to build up their military strength, modernizing their army with the very technologies introduced by the Hyksos. Their ambition was clear: to drive out the foreign rulers and reclaim Egypt's lost glory. The quiet preparations in the south, the training of soldiers, the forging of new weapons, all spoke of a coming storm. Seqenenretau, a Theban king, is often credited with initiating the direct confrontation with the Hyksos. Legends speak of a quarrel over a hippopotamus pool, a seemingly trivial dispute that escalated into open warfare, though the underlying cause was undoubtedly the deep-seated desire for liberation. Seqenenretau met a violent end on the battlefield, his mummy bearing gruesome wounds that attest to the ferocity of the conflict. His sacrifice, however, was not in vain. He became a martyr for the cause of national independence, inspiring his successors to continue the fight. His son, Kamose, picked up the mantle, leading a series of campaigns that pushed the Hyksos back towards their capital at Avaris. Kamose's quiet, strategic victories chipped away at Hyksos dominance, bolstering the morale of the Egyptian forces. He recorded his triumphs on stelae, proclaiming his divine right to rule over all of Egypt and denouncing the Hyksos as illegitimate occupiers. His reign was a crucial step in the long, arduous process of expelling the foreigners. The quiet roar of the Theban army was growing louder, challenging the silence of foreign occupation. It was Kamose's successor, Ahmose I, who ultimately achieved the complete expulsion of the Hyksos and the reunification of Egypt, thus ushering in the glorious era known as the New Kingdom. Imagine the quiet jubilation, the profound sense of relief and triumph as the foreign rulers were finally driven from Egyptian soil. Moses' campaigns were methodical and relentless. He besieged Avaris, the Hyksos capital, and after a prolonged struggle, finally captured it. He then pursued the fleeing Hyksos into southern Palestine, ensuring that they would not pose a threat to Egypt again. This decisive victory, achieved around 1550 BCE, was not merely a military triumph. It was a profound act of national rebirth, a quiet yet powerful declaration of Egypt's renewed sovereignty and strength. With the Hyksos gone, Amos-I established the 18th dynasty, laying the foundation for an empire that would stretch far beyond the traditional borders of Egypt. The lessons of the second intermediate period were clear. A strong, centralized government was essential, and Egypt needed to be proactive in securing its frontiers to prevent future invasions. The quiet introspection of the Middle Kingdom was replaced by an outward-looking ambition, a determination to project Egyptian power and influence across the Near East. The New Kingdom, spanning from approximately 1550 to 1070 BCE, represents the zenith of ancient Egyptian power, wealth, and cultural achievement. It was an age of grand temples, powerful pharaohs, and an expansive empire, an era when Egypt interacted more extensively with the broader world, both through trade and conquest. The quiet confidence of the earlier periods swelled into a booming declaration of imperial might. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom were truly imperial rulers, often depicted as warrior kings leading their armies into battle, brandishing the mace and bow, ensuring the triumph of Ma'at, not just within Egypt's borders, but across distant lands. The concept of the two lands expanded to encompass a vast realm, reflecting Egypt's newfound geopolitical dominance. The capital remained in Thebes, which grew into a magnificent city, a bustling metropolis adorned with monumental temples on both banks of the Nile. The west bank of Thebes became the city of the dead, home to the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens, where pharaohs and their consorts were interred in hidden, rock-cut tombs, a departure from the visible pyramids of the Old Kingdom. This shift was a practical response to tomb robbing, an attempt to safeguard the royal dead and their treasures for eternity. The quiet secrecy of these underground burial chambers, adorned with vibrant paintings and intricate hieroglyphs, tells a new story of how the Egyptians envisioned their journey to the afterlife. The 18th dynasty, in particular, boasted some of Egypt's most famous and influential rulers. Thutmose I campaigned deep into Nubia and reached the Euphrates River in Asia, establishing Egypt as a dominant force. His reign initiated a period of quiet yet consistent imperial expansion. His daughter, Hatshepsut, would later ascend to the throne, not as a regent, but as a full-fledged female pharaoh, a remarkable and groundbreaking achievement. Hatshepsut's reign was largely one of peace and immense prosperity. She focused on trade, sending expeditions to the fabled land of Punt, bringing back exotic goods such as frankincense, myrrh, gold, and exotic animals. Her most enduring legacy is her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, a stunning example of New Kingdom architecture. Its elegant terraces and colonnades carved into the cliff face are a testament to her vision and the artistic sophistication of her era. The quiet reverence of its design, the harmonious integration with the natural landscape, speak of a reign dedicated to beauty and spiritual devotion, a stark contrast to the militaristic expansion that often defined the New Kingdom. Following Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of Egypt, took the throne. His was a reign of relentless military campaigning, solidifying and expanding Egypt's empire across the Near East. He led numerous successful campaigns into Syria and Palestine, establishing Egyptian hegemony over a vast network of vassal states. His victories were meticulously recorded on temple walls, celebrating his prowess as a warrior king and the unmatched power of Egypt. His annals, inscribed at Karnak, detail his quiet, strategic brilliance and the scale of his conquests, underscoring a period of unrivaled military might. The spoils of these conquests flowed back to Egypt, enriching the temples and the royal treasury, financing unprecedented building projects and a luxurious lifestyle for the elite. The wealth generated by the empire led to an explosion of monumental construction. The temples of Karnak and Luxor, dedicated primarily to the state god Amun-Re, grew into vast, sprawling complexes, their colossal pylons, towering obelisks, and intricate relief carvings proclaiming the glory of the gods and the pharaohs. Imagine the quiet awe of pilgrims entering these sacred spaces, surrounded by colossal statues and shaded by massive columns, feeling the presence of the divine. The sound of priestly chanting, the scent of burning incense, the soft shuffle of sandaled feet, all would have contributed to an atmosphere of profound spiritual grandeur. Religion during the New Kingdom continued to evolve, with the cult of Amun-Re, the hidden god of Thebes, rising to supreme prominence as the king of the gods. His priesthood became incredibly powerful and wealthy, sometimes even rivaling the authority of the pharaoh himself. This growing influence of the Amun priesthood would later play a significant role in political and religious upheavals. The quiet yet immense power wielded by the priests, managing vast estates and receiving substantial offerings, underscored a complex interplay between divine and earthly authority. Amidst this opulence and imperial ambition, a dramatic and disruptive episode unfolded under the reign of Akhenaten, a pharaoh who initiated a quiet yet radical religious revolution. Originally named Amenhotep IV, he abandoned the traditional polytheistic religion of Egypt, particularly the powerful cult of Amun, and instead promoted the worship of a single universal god, the Aten, represented by the disk of the sun. This was a dramatic departure from millennia of religious tradition, a quiet theological earthquake that shook the very foundations of Egyptian society. Akhenaten moved his capital from Thebes to a new purpose-built city called Akhenaten, Horizon of the Aten, now known as Amarna. Here, he and his beautiful wife Nefertiti presided over a court dedicated to the Aten, fostering a unique artistic style known as the Amarna period. This art was characterized by its naturalism and fluid lines, a stark contrast to the rigid, idealized forms of earlier Egyptian art. Pharaohs and their families were depicted with elongated skulls, distended bellies, and often in intimate, informal settings. A quiet revolution in artistic expression that mirrored the religious upheaval. The Amarna period, though artistically groundbreaking, was politically and religiously tumultuous. Akhenaten's radical monotheism alienated the powerful priesthood of Amun and many traditionalists. His obsessive focus on the Aten led to a neglect of foreign affairs, causing Egypt's influence in its empire to wane. After his death, his religious revolution was systematically dismantled. His name was erased from monuments, his city abandoned, and the worship of Amun and the old gods was fiercely restored. His successors, notably Tutankhamun, originally Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, moved the capital back to Thebes and oversaw the quiet restoration of the traditional pantheon. Tutankhamun, though a minor king whose reign was cut tragically short, achieved posthumous fame through the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings. This quiet discovery in 1922 offered an unparalleled glimpse into the wealth and artistry of the New Kingdom, providing an abundance of treasures and insights into royal burial practices and reigniting global fascination with ancient Egypt. The quiet splendor of his golden mask, the intricate details of his sarcophagi, all speak of a civilization that had mastered artistry and craftsmanship to an extraordinary degree, even after a period of religious turmoil. The final pharaohs of the 18th dynasty and the subsequent 19th dynasty continued to rebuild Egypt's imperial power and monumental glory. Horemheb, a general who became pharaoh, consolidated the restoration of traditional religion and governance. Then came the era of the Ramessides, beginning with Ramesses I, but truly defined by the powerful reigns of Seti I and his son Ramesses II, often referred to as Ramesses the Great. Seti I initiated ambitious building projects, most notably his magnificent temple at Abydos, with its exquisite relief carvings, and his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, considered one of the finest and most complete. His reign was a period of quiet consolidation and artistic brilliance, setting the stage for his son's even grander ambitions. Ramesses II, who reigned for an astonishing 66 years, left an indelible mark on the landscape of Egypt. He was a prolific builder, commissioning more monuments than almost any other pharaoh. His grand temples at Abu Simbel, carved into the solid rock face, with their colossal seated figures guarding the entrance, are a testament to his immense ego and power. His mortuary temple, the Ramesseum, and the vast additions he made to the temples of Karnak and Luxor all speak of a pharaoh determined to leave an eternal legacy. The quiet majesty of these structures, their sheer scale, continues to inspire wonder, reminding us of the unwavering ambition of this great pharaoh. Ramesses II was also a formidable warrior. He led campaigns against the Hittite Empire, Egypt's great rival in the Near East. The most famous of these conflicts was the Battle of Kadesh, one of the best documented battles in ancient history, fought around 1274 BCE. Although depicted by Ramesses as a glorious victory, the battle was likely a stalemate, leading to the world's first known peace treaty between two great powers, recorded on temple walls at Karnak. This quiet diplomatic achievement, ensuring a period of relative peace and stability in the Levant, allowed Ramesses to focus his energies on internal development and the construction projects that defined his reign. His vast family, his long rule, and his relentless pursuit of monumental glory cemented his image as the archetypal pharaoh, a living god whose presence was felt across the entirety of Egypt and beyond. Yet even during the reign of such a colossal figure, subtle undercurrents were at play. The sheer scale of imperial expenditure, the increasing drain on resources, and the growing complexity of administering such a vast empire began to place immense strain on the Egyptian state. The prosperity of the new kingdom, while breathtaking, was not without its costs, and the seeds of a future decline were being quietly sown. As Ramesses II's reign drew to a close, and throughout the subsequent Ramesside pharaohs of the 19th and 20th dynasties, Egypt found itself facing new and increasingly complex challenges. The quiet stability of the peace treaty with the Hittites eventually gave way to broader regional instabilities. Mysterious groups, collectively known as the Sea Peoples, began to emerge from the Mediterranean, launching devastating raids on coastal cities across the Levant and disrupting established trade routes. These maritime raiders, their origins still debated by historians, represented a new and formidable threat. They were not organized empires, but rather migrating peoples, often well-armed and desperate, whose incursions left a trail of destruction from Mycenaean Greece to the Hittite heartland. Egypt, too, felt their destructive touch. Pharaoh Merneptah, Ramesses II's son and successor, successfully repelled a major invasion of the Sea Peoples and their Libyan allies in the 5th year of his reign. His victory, though costly, was vital in preserving Egypt's core territories and preventing a widespread collapse. The quiet rustle of fear, the distant cries of ravaged coastlines, began to permeate the previously secure borders of the empire. However, The threat of the Sea Peoples persisted, and their repeated assaults, combined with internal strife and economic woes, further weakened Egypt. Rameses III, a pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, faced another massive invasion of the Sea Peoples and Libyans. He successfully defeated them in a series of land and sea battles, saving Egypt from total collapse. His mortuary temple at Medinet Habu stands as a vibrant testament to these victories, its walls depicting scenes of epic naval engagements and land battles, a quiet declaration of defiance against existential threats. Despite these triumphs, the wars had taken a heavy toll, exhausting Egypt's resources and contributing to a gradual decline in the pharaoh's prestige and power. The empire, once a beacon of unassailable strength, began to show cracks under the relentless pressure. Internally, the later Ramesside period witnessed a quiet but significant erosion of central authority. The priesthood of Amun-Re at Thebes, already immensely wealthy and influential, continued to accumulate land and resources, effectively becoming a state within a state. Their power increasingly rivaled that of the pharaoh, creating a subtle yet profound shift in the political landscape. Bureaucracy became increasingly corrupt, and the economy, strained by endless wars and declining foreign trade, struggled. The once mighty royal coffers dwindled, leading to strikes among tomb workers and a rise in tomb robbing, an ominous sign of societal breakdown and a diminishing respect for the sacred dead. The quiet reverence for eternity was slowly being replaced by the desperate scramble for survival. The final pharaohs of the new kingdom were increasingly weak, their control often extending little beyond the capital, Thebes. Nubia, once a rich source of gold and manpower, began to assert its independence, and Egypt's territories in the Levant gradually slipped away, falling under the influence of emerging local powers. The grand empire that Ahmose I had forged, and that Thutmose III and Rameses II had expanded and glorified, slowly began to contract, shrinking back to its original borders. The quiet retreat, the gradual loss of distant provinces, signaled the end of an era of imperial dominance. Around 1070 BCE, with the death of Rameses the Woodkin, the new kingdom quietly, almost imperceptibly, came to an end. There was no dramatic collapse, no sudden invasion of the capital. Instead, it was a gradual fragmentation, a slow unraveling of central power that ushered in the Third Intermediate Period. A complex and often turbulent era that lasted for approximately 400 years, until around 712 BCE. This period was characterized by political fragmentation, with Egypt divided into several distinct power centers. In the south, the high priests of Amun-Re at Thebes effectively ruled Upper Egypt, establishing a theocratic state. Though they acknowledged the nominal authority of the pharaohs in the north, their power was absolute in their domain, commanding vast wealth and a large administrative apparatus. The quiet, spiritual authority of the priesthood had fully blossomed into overt political control. In the north, particularly in the Delta, various local dynasties, often of Libyan origin, rose to prominence. Libyans had long served as mercenaries in the Egyptian army and had settled in the Delta region. Over generations, they had assimilated aspects of Egyptian culture and religion, eventually gaining enough power to establish their own ruling houses. The 21st and 22nd dynasties, in particular, were dominated by Libyan chieftains who adopted pharaonic titles and sought to emulate the traditions of their Egyptian predecessors. Cities like Tanis and Bubastis became important centers of power, reflecting a quiet yet significant shift in Egypt's ethnic and political landscape. Imagine a land still imbued with the grandeur of its past, but now fractured, its monumental temples standing as silent witnesses to a bygone era of unified glory. The pharaoh, once the unquestioned divine ruler of all Egypt, was now one of several powerful figures, his authority often limited by geography and the strength of his rivals. While there was cultural continuity, Egyptian religion, art, and language persisted. The political landscape was a complex mosaic of competing interests. Despite the political fragmentation, this era was not entirely one of decline. Burial practices continued to evolve, with an emphasis on rich private tombs and elaborate coffins. Metalworking, particularly in bronze and gold, reached new heights of artistry and craftsmanship. The period also saw the emergence of significant prophetic and lamentation literature, reflecting the anxieties and uncertainties of a changing world, but also a deep-seated hope for the restoration of Ma'at. The quiet whispers of doubt and longing mingled with the enduring faith in ancient traditions. However, the internal divisions made Egypt vulnerable to external powers. To the south, in Nubia, a powerful new kingdom was steadily rising. The Nubians, who had long been under Egyptian cultural influence, now began to assert their own identity and power. Centered at Napata, their rulers gradually built a formidable state, embracing Egyptian religious and cultural practices, revering Amun as their chief deity. They saw themselves as the true guardians of Egyptian tradition, purer and more faithful than the fragmented dynasties to the north. The quiet strength of their burgeoning kingdom would soon turn into an unstoppable force. By the late 8th century BCE, the Nubian pharaohs, considering themselves the rightful heirs to the Egyptian legacy, began a quiet, methodical campaign to reunite the two lands and restore what they perceived as the true order of Ma'at. Piye, a formidable Nubian king, led a massive invasion of Egypt, systematically conquering the various Libyan and local dynasties that controlled the delta. His forces pushed northward, battling and eventually subjugating the various northern rulers. Imagine the clash of cultures. The proud Nubian warriors, deeply devout, advancing with a righteous fervor against the fragmented, squabbling Egyptian princedoms. The quiet determination of Piye's forces, driven by a deep reverence for Egyptian tradition, stood in stark contrast to the internal divisions of their northern neighbors. Piye meticulously recorded his triumphs on the Victory Stela found at Gebel Barkal, detailing his campaigns and emphasizing his role as a restorer of order and piety. His account vividly describes his disdain for the northern rulers who had neglected the temples and embraced un-Egyptian practices. Piye's conquest marked the beginning of the 25th dynasty, often referred to as the Kushite or Nubian dynasty. For nearly a century, Nubian pharaohs ruled over a reunited Egypt, from their capital in Napata and later Meroe. These pharaohs, including Shabaka, Taharka and Tutankhamun, were deeply conservative, dedicating themselves to restoring old kingdom traditions, art and religious practices. They initiated significant building projects, particularly in their homeland of Nubia, constructing temples and pyramids that echoed the grandeur of their Egyptian predecessors. The quiet reverence for the past, the meticulous revival of ancient forms, defined their reign. Their rule brought a period of renewed stability to Egypt, but it also placed the country on a collision course with another rising superpower in the Near East, the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians, a relentlessly expansionist military machine, had by this time carved out an immense empire stretching from Mesopotamia to the borders of Egypt. Their policy was one of brutal subjugation and control, and they viewed any independent power in the Levant, particularly Egypt, as a direct challenge to their hegemony. The quiet tension between these two great powers, one a spiritual and cultural giant, the other a military juggernaut, slowly built towards an inevitable confrontation. The Nubian pharaohs, understanding the strategic importance of the Levant, often intervened in local politics there, supporting rebellions against Assyrian rule. This, of course, was intolerable to the Assyrians. Beginning in the mid-7th century BCE, the Assyrians launched a series of devastating invasions into Egypt. Pharaoh Taharqa, a powerful Nubian ruler, initially managed to repel some of these attacks, but the sheer might of the Assyrian war machine was overwhelming. In 671 BCE, the Assyrian king Akhenaten invaded Egypt, driving Taharqa south into Nubia and capturing Memphis. A few years later, Taharqa briefly regained control of Memphis, but the Assyrians, under Akhenaten's successor Ashurbanipal, returned with overwhelming force. They sacked Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt, a city that had stood for centuries as a symbol of Egyptian resilience and power. The quiet devastation wrought by the Assyrians, the plundering of sacred sites, was a profound blow to the Egyptian psyche and a clear message of Assyrian dominance. The echo of distant war cries and the rumble of conquering chariots broke the long-held peace of the Nile. The Assyrian conquest marked the end of the Nubian dynasty's rule over Egypt. While the Assyrians did not fully annex Egypt, they established a series of vassal rulers, mostly Egyptian princes, to govern the country on their behalf. This was a bitter humiliation for a land that had once been the undisputed master of its own destiny. The quiet shame of foreign subjugation, the constant presence of an occupying force, weighed heavily on the collective consciousness. From this period of turmoil, a new native Egyptian dynasty, the 26th, known as the Site dynasty, gradually emerged. Psamtik I, a powerful prince from the city of Sais in the Delta, initially served as an Assyrian vassal. However, as Assyrian power began to wane due to internal revolts and external pressures from emerging rivals like the Babylonians, Psamtik I shrewdly seized the opportunity. He gradually consolidated his control over Egypt, quietly expelling the remaining Assyrian garrisons and uniting the two lands once more. The Site period, lasting from 664 to 525 BCE, was a remarkable era of revival, often termed the Site Renaissance. Psamtik I and his successors, including Necho I and Ahmose II, sought to deliberately emulate the glories of the Old Kingdom and the early Middle Kingdom. This revival was reflected in art, which adopted the serene, idealized forms of earlier periods, and in religious practices, which saw a renewed emphasis on ancient rituals and beliefs. There was a quiet, determined effort to reclaim an authentic Egyptian identity after centuries of fragmentation and foreign rule. Economically, the Site pharaohs encouraged trade and established strong relationships with Greek mercenaries and merchants. Greeks were allowed to settle in Egypt, notably at the trading port of Naucratis in the Delta, facilitating a significant exchange of goods and ideas. Necho II even initiated the construction of a canal connecting the Nile to the Red Sea, a precursor to the Suez Canal, demonstrating an ambitious vision for maritime trade and strategic control. The quiet hum of commerce, the bustling of foreign ships in Egyptian ports, brought new wealth and an outward-looking perspective. The Site dynasty enjoyed a period of relative peace and prosperity, but the geopolitical landscape of the Near East remained volatile. The Assyrian Empire had finally collapsed, but new powers, particularly the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the rising Achaemenid Persian Empire, were now vying for dominance. Egypt, trying to maintain its independence, found itself caught between these formidable forces, often attempting to play one against the other. The quiet diplomacy and strategic maneuvering became increasingly complex and fraught with danger. The inevitable clash came with the Persians. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II launched a full-scale invasion of Egypt. The Battle of Pelusium, fought at the eastern frontier of the Delta, was a decisive victory for the Persians. The Egyptian forces, despite their bravery, were no match for the superior numbers and military tactics of the Persian army. The last native pharaoh of the Site dynasty, Psamtik III, was defeated and captured. With this conquest, Egypt became a satrapy or province of the vast Achaemenid Persian Empire. This marked the beginning of a long period of foreign rule that would last for centuries, fundamentally altering the trajectory of Egyptian civilization. The quiet pride of an independent kingdom, meticulously rebuilt during the Site Renaissance, was once again overshadowed by the reality of foreign dominion. The Persian kings, including Cambyses II and Darius I, styled themselves as pharaohs, adopting traditional Egyptian titles and commissioning building projects. But their rule was fundamentally different. They governed Egypt as part of a much larger empire, integrating it into a vast administrative system that stretched from Greece to India. The initial Persian rule, known as the 27th dynasty, was largely tolerant, with the Persians respecting Egyptian customs and religion, especially under Darius I, who sponsored the restoration of temples and supported Egyptian legal traditions. However, periods of heavy taxation and cultural insensitivity led to several Egyptian revolts against Persian rule. The quiet longing for independence, the deep-seated pride in their unique heritage, repeatedly fueled these uprisings, though they were often brutally suppressed. During this time, Egypt became a prize in the ongoing struggles between the Persian Empire and the burgeoning power of the Greek city-states. Egyptian mercenaries often fought on both sides, and Greek influence, which had begun during the Site period, continued to grow. Eventually, taking advantage of Persian weakness, native Egyptian pharaohs managed to briefly reassert their independence during the 28th, 29th and 30th dynasties, a fleeting period of self-rule that offered a final, quiet flicker of Egyptian sovereignty. These last native pharaohs, such as Nectanebo I and Nectanebo II, desperately tried to defend Egypt against repeated Persian attempts at reconquest, building fortifications and patronizing temples in a final effort to maintain their ancient heritage. However, this brief resurgence was ultimately unsustainable. The Persian Empire, despite its internal struggles, remained a formidable power. In 343 BCE, Artaxerxes III finally succeeded in reconquering Egypt, bringing an end to the last native Egyptian dynasties. This second period of Persian rule was harsher, marked by greater repression and disrespect for Egyptian religion. The quiet despair of a people under foreign subjugation deepened as the dream of an independent Egypt seemed to fade into distant memory. But the story of ancient Egypt was not yet over. It was merely preparing for another dramatic twist. Just over a decade after the Second Persian conquest, a new and unstoppable force emerged from the west, Alexander the Great of Macedon. In 332 BCE, Alexander, having decisively defeated the Persian Empire in battle, marched into Egypt. His arrival was met not with resistance, but with a quiet, joyous welcome from the Egyptians, who viewed him as a liberator from the oppressive Persian yoke. Alexander embraced the role of pharaoh, visiting the oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, where he was reportedly confirmed as a son of the god, a legitimizing act that resonated deeply with Egyptian traditions. He established the great city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, envisioning it as a new intellectual and commercial hub, a bridge between Egypt and the Hellenistic world. Its quiet, strategic location, its grand harbor, and its towering lighthouse would soon make it one of the most celebrated cities of the ancient world. Alexander's stay in Egypt was relatively brief. He soon departed to continue his conquests, leaving behind a Macedonian general named Ptolemy to govern the newly acquired territory. Upon Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his vast empire was carved up among his generals, the Diadochi, Ptolemy, shrewd and ambitious, eventually declared himself king of Egypt in 305 BCE, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty. This marked the beginning of nearly 3 centuries of Greek rule over Egypt, an era that would profoundly shape the country's culture, politics, and economy. The Ptolemaic pharaohs, while Greek in origin and language, consciously adopted many aspects of Egyptian kingship. They were crowned in Memphis, according to ancient Egyptian rites, patronized Egyptian temples, and commissioned inscriptions in hieroglyphs. They depicted themselves in traditional pharaonic garb, in temple reliefs, seeking to legitimize their rule in the eyes of their Egyptian subjects. The quiet fusion of 2 distinct cultures, Hellenistic and Egyptian, began to create a unique and vibrant synthesis. Alexandria, the capital city, became a dazzling center of Hellenistic learning and culture. Its legendary Library of Alexandria housed an unparalleled collection of scrolls, attracting scholars, scientists, and philosophers from across the ancient world. The city's lighthouse, the Pharaohs, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guided ships from distant lands to its bustling port. Science, mathematics, philosophy, and art flourished, creating an intellectual environment of quiet innovation and discovery. The Ptolemaic period saw the construction of magnificent new temples, such as those at Edfu and Dendera, built in a traditional Egyptian style, but often with Greek architectural influences. These temples are remarkably well preserved, offering a vivid glimpse into the religious practices and artistic continuity of the era. The quiet reverence for ancient gods, meticulously maintained by the Ptolemaic rulers, showcased their commitment to upholding Egyptian religious traditions. However, beneath this veneer of cultural assimilation, tensions simmered. Greek was the language of administration and the elite, while Egyptian was spoken by the vast majority of the population. The Greeks often held privileged positions, leading to resentment among the native Egyptians. The Ptolemies, though they engaged in Egyptian rituals, fundamentally viewed themselves as Greek rulers of a rich strategic territory within the Hellenistic world. The quiet friction between the ruling Greek elite and the indigenous Egyptian population was a constant feature of this period. The later Ptolemaic pharaohs were increasingly embroiled in dynastic struggles and political intrigues, often weakening the kingdom. The once vast wealth of Egypt was gradually depleted by constant warfare, lavish lifestyles, and internal strife. Rome, a rapidly expanding power in the Mediterranean, began to exert increasing influence over Egyptian affairs, often intervening in Ptolemaic succession disputes. The quiet shadow of a new, even more formidable empire began to fall across the land of the Nile. The most famous and arguably most tragic figure of the Ptolemaic dynasty was its last active ruler, Queen Cleopatra VII. A woman of extraordinary intelligence, charisma, and ambition, Cleopatra mastered multiple languages, including Egyptian, and deeply understood the political landscape of her time. She shrewdly cultivated alliances with powerful Roman leaders, first Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, to maintain Egypt's independence and restore its former glory. Her quiet, strategic brilliance, her captivating charm, and her unwavering determination to preserve her kingdom made her one of history's most iconic figures. Cleopatra's affair with Julius Caesar produced a son, Caesarion, whom she hoped would one day rule both Rome and Egypt. After Caesar's assassination, she formed a powerful alliance with Mark Antony, a leading Roman general, sharing his ambition to establish a new Eastern Empire that would rival and perhaps even eclipse Rome itself. Their quiet yet audacious vision was to forge a Hellenistic kingdom centered in Alexandria, one that would blend Egyptian wealth with Roman military might, charting a new course for the ancient world. Their relationship, however, was not just one of political calculation. It was a passionate and tempestuous bond, fueled by mutual ambition and a deep, undeniable connection. Antony, captivated by Cleopatra's intellect and allure, became increasingly devoted to her, spending years in Alexandria, much to the consternation of his Roman rivals, particularly Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Octavian, a shrewd and calculating politician, skillfully exploited this perception of Antony's oriental devotion, portraying him as a man corrupted by an exotic queen, neglecting his Roman duties and betraying the Republic. The Roman populace, ever wary of foreign influence and fiercely proud of their republican ideals, began to view the couple with suspicion, then with outright hostility. The quiet power struggle between Octavian in the west and Antony and Cleopatra in the east escalated into an ideological and military confrontation of epic proportions. Octavian effectively declared war not just on Antony, but on Cleopatra and Egypt itself, casting it as a struggle to save Rome from the decadent influence of the East. The stage was set for the final climactic act of the Hellenistic world. The decisive engagement came in 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, off the coast of Greece. It was a massive naval battle, pitting the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra against Octavian's superior fleet, commanded by the brilliant General Agrippa. The battle itself was chaotic and fierce, a maelstrom of oar-driven ships, javelins, and flaming arrows. As the battle turned against them, Cleopatra, realizing the devastating tactical blunders and perhaps sensing the futility of continued resistance, famously broke away with her Egyptian squadron, sailing towards Egypt. Antony, in a desperate and controversial move, followed her, abandoning his remaining forces. This perceived desertion was a catastrophic blow to his morale and his remaining loyalists. The quiet hope of an Eastern empire crumbled under the weight of Roman supremacy. The defeat at Actium was total and irreversible. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, their grand dreams shattered. Octavian, now master of the Roman world, pursued them relentlessly. In 30 BCE, his legions marched into Egypt. Antony, facing betrayal and the utter collapse of his army, chose to fall on his own sword, a final tragic act of a Roman general. Cleopatra, always a survivor, attempted one last negotiation with Octavian, hoping to preserve her kingdom for her children, especially Caesarion. But Octavian, cold and implacable, had no intention of allowing her to live, knowing that as long as she breathed, she would remain a powerful symbol of resistance and a potential threat to his nascent empire. He intended to parade her through the streets of Rome as a trophy, a symbol of his ultimate triumph. Cleopatra, realizing her fate and unwilling to suffer the humiliation of being paraded as a captive, made her final, dramatic choice. She famously took her own life, likely by the bite of an asp, a symbol of royalty in ancient Egypt. With her death, the 3-century-long Ptolemaic dynasty came to an abrupt and definitive end. Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, was quickly hunted down and executed by Octavian, who ruthlessly eliminated any potential rival to his claim as Caesar's sole heir. The quiet whisper of a unified Romano-Egyptian future was silenced forever. Egypt, now a direct possession of Rome, became a Roman province. It was too rich, too strategically vital as the breadbasket of the empire, to be left to a proconsul. Instead, Octavian, soon to be Augustus, the first Roman emperor, declared it his personal domain, governed by a prefect answerable only to him. No senator was even allowed to set foot in Egypt without imperial permission, a testament to its unique status and immense importance. The quiet shift from a proud, independent kingdom, however Hellenized, to a mere provincial breadbasket for a distant empire, was profound. The Roman period in Egypt, beginning in 30 BCE, would last for over 6 centuries until the Arab conquest in 641 CE. It was an era characterized by Roman administrative efficiency, economic exploitation, and a complex cultural interplay between Roman power, Greek intellectualism, and enduring Egyptian traditions. The quiet rhythm of the Nile continued, but the heartbeat of Egypt now resonated with the distant drum of Rome. Under Roman rule, Egypt's primary function was to feed the vast Roman Empire. Its fertile fields, watered by the Nile, produced immense quantities of grain, which were shipped directly to Rome to feed its burgeoning population and prevent unrest. The Roman administration was meticulous in its taxation and agricultural management, ensuring a steady supply of this vital commodity. While this brought a degree of stability and infrastructure improvements, it also meant that much of Egypt's wealth flowed out of the country, enriching Rome rather than its own people. The quiet labor of Egyptian farmers, toiling in the same fields for millennia, now directly supported the might of a foreign empire. Culturally, Egypt became a fascinating melting pot. Roman officials, soldiers and merchants mingled with the existing Greek elite and the vast native Egyptian population. Latin, the language of the Roman administration, was introduced, but Greek remained the dominant language of the elite and commerce, especially in Alexandria, which continued to thrive as a major intellectual and cultural hub. Egyptian language, Coptic, and religious practices, however, continued among the native populace. The quiet interplay of these languages and cultures, sometimes harmonious, sometimes discordant, formed the rich tapestry of Roman Egypt. The Romans, ever pragmatic, largely allowed the traditional Egyptian religion to persist. Temples continued to be built and maintained, often with Roman emperors depicted in traditional pharaonic garb, making offerings to Egyptian gods, a continuation of the Ptolemaic policy of legitimizing foreign rule through cultural assimilation. The Temple of Philae, dedicated to Isis, continued to be a vibrant pilgrimage site well into the Christian era, its quiet sanctity enduring through centuries of changing rulers. Roman tourists, drawn by Egypt's ancient mystique, visited the pyramids and temples, contributing to the country's economy and taking back souvenirs that hinted at the profound spiritual world they encountered. However, the Roman emperors, unlike the Ptolemies, rarely resided in Egypt, governing through their prefects. The direct personal connection between ruler and land that had characterized earlier pharaonic dynasties was largely severed. The pharaoh, once a living god, was now a distant imperial figure represented by statues and inscriptions. The quiet dignity of local traditions, while respected, was ultimately subservient to the overarching authority of Rome. The intellectual life of Alexandria continued to flourish. The library, though it suffered damage and decline over time, still attracted scholars. Important scientific and philosophical advancements continued, with figures like Claudius Ptolemy, the geographer and astronomer, and Euclid, the mathematician, contributing immensely to human knowledge. The city was a nexus of ideas, where Hellenistic philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and later early Christian thought converged and clashed. The quiet hum of scholarly debate, the rustle of papyrus scrolls, filled the halls of Alexandria's institutions. As the centuries progressed, a new religious force began to take root and spread across Egypt: Christianity. Initially persecuted by the Roman authorities, the new faith found fertile ground among the native Egyptian population, offering a message of hope and equality that resonated with a people under foreign rule. Alexandria became an important center of early Christian theology, giving rise to figures like Origen and Clement of Alexandria. Monasticism, the practice of individuals dedicating their lives to spiritual contemplation in isolation or in communities, famously emerged in the Egyptian desert with figures like Saint Anthony and Saint Pachomius. The quiet dedication of these early Christians, their unwavering faith in the face of persecution, marked a profound spiritual transformation for Egypt. The growth of Christianity, however, brought new tensions. The ancient Egyptian pagan religion, though tolerated by the Romans, gradually came into conflict with the monotheistic fervor of the Christians. Temples were eventually closed, statues of gods were defaced, and many ancient practices slowly faded away, replaced by Christian rituals and beliefs. The quiet, centuries-old rhythms of offering and prayer to the ancient pantheon slowly gave way to the chant of psalms and the veneration of saints. By the late Roman period and the subsequent Byzantine era, Egypt was a predominantly Christian country. The Coptic Church, an indigenous branch of Christianity, became a powerful cultural and religious force, preserving elements of the ancient Egyptian language, now written with Greek letters and some demotic signs, and artistic traditions. The Coptic monasteries, many of which still stand today, became centers of learning and refuge, quietly maintaining a distinct Egyptian identity within the larger Roman-Byzantine world. However, the Roman Empire itself was facing increasing internal strife and external pressures. The division of the empire into East and West, the rise of new barbarian kingdoms in the West, and constant warfare along its frontiers meant that even the breadbasket of Egypt was not entirely secure. Political instability, economic decline, and occasional outbreaks of plague further strained the fabric of Egyptian society. The once mighty Roman grip, though still firm, began to show signs of wear. The Byzantine period, a continuation of Roman rule from Constantinople, saw Egypt remain a vital province, but one often caught in imperial theological disputes, particularly over the nature of Christ, which further alienated the Coptic population from the imperial capital. The quiet dissent, the theological schisms, created internal divisions that would prove crucial in the face of a new, emerging power. In the 7th century CE, a revolutionary force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula, Islam. Driven by a powerful new faith and a desire for expansion, the early Muslim armies rapidly conquered vast territories from the Byzantine and Sasanian Persian empires. Their gaze soon turned to the rich lands of Egypt. In 639 CE, an Arab army of approximately 4,000 men, led by Amr ibn al-As, began the Muslim conquest of Egypt. The Byzantine garrisons, often thinly spread and facing the indifference, if not outright hostility, of the Coptic population alienated by religious disputes, offered piecemeal resistance. The fortified city of Pelusium, a traditional gateway into Egypt, fell after a brief siege. The Arab forces then advanced westward, engaging Byzantine troops in skirmishes and gradually gaining ground. The decisive moment came with the siege of Babylon Fortress, a major Byzantine stronghold near modern-day Cairo. The siege lasted for months, a testament to the fortress's formidable defenses. However, in 641 CE, after intense fighting, the Arabs finally captured Babylon. This victory opened the path to Alexandria, the glittering jewel of Egypt. Alexandria, with its massive walls and strong naval presence, was initially thought impregnable. Yet after another prolonged siege, and facing a population that was either war-weary or disaffected with Byzantine rule, the city eventually surrendered in September 641 CE. The terms of surrender were negotiated, allowing the Byzantine garrison to evacuate and ensuring the safety of the Christian population, who were granted dhimmi status, allowing them to practice their religion in exchange for a special tax, jizya. The Muslim conquest marked a profound turning point in Egyptian history, signaling the end of over a millennium of Greco-Roman rule and the beginning of the Islamic era. The quiet, yet profound shift in political, cultural, and religious identity would reshape Egypt for centuries to come. The land of the Pharaohs, the cradle of ancient civilization, now embraced a new faith and a new language. Under Islamic rule, Egypt gradually became an integral part of the expanding Muslim caliphate. Arabic became the language of administration and eventually the dominant spoken language. Though Coptic continued to be used in religious contexts, Islam slowly but steadily spread throughout the population, often through a process of quiet conversion, though large Christian communities persisted, particularly in Upper Egypt. Fustat, near the old Babylon fortress, was established as the new administrative capital, eventually growing into Cairo, one of the greatest cities of the Islamic world. New mosques, schools, and markets arose, reflecting the vibrant new culture. Alexandria, while retaining its importance as a port, gradually lost its preeminence as an intellectual center to the burgeoning cities of the Islamic world. Though its legacy of learning continued to inspire, Egypt flourished under various Islamic dynasties, including the Umayyads, Abbasids, Tulunids, Ikhshidids, Fatimids, Ayyubids, and Mamluks. Each dynasty left its own unique mark on the country, contributing to its rich architectural heritage, its administrative systems, and its cultural identity. The quiet, rhythmic call to prayer, echoing from minarets across the land, became a new, enduring soundtrack for the Nile. The Fatimid Caliphate, an Ismaili Shia dynasty that ruled from 969 to 1171 CE, made Cairo their magnificent capital, establishing the Al-Azhar Mosque and University, which remains one of the oldest and most prestigious centers of Islamic learning in the world. Their reign was a period of immense prosperity and artistic flourishing, characterized by grand public works, bustling trade, and a vibrant intellectual life. The quiet wisdom emanating from Al-Azhar, the diligent study of Islamic sciences, continued Egypt's long tradition of scholarship. The Mamluks, a military caste of slave soldiers who rose to power in the 13th century, established a powerful and enduring empire in Egypt and Syria. They famously repelled the Mongol invasions, saving the Islamic world from likely devastation, and played a crucial role in expelling the last of the Crusaders from the Levant. Their rule, though often turbulent, saw significant architectural achievements and maintained Egypt's status as a major regional power. The quiet strength of their cavalry, the disciplined precision of their tactics, proved decisive in protecting the heartlands of Islam. However, by the late 15th century, the geopolitical landscape was once again shifting. A new, formidable power was rising in Anatolia, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans, having conquered Constantinople in 1453 and expanded across the Balkans and Anatolia, set their sights on the Mamluk Sultanate, seeing it as a rival and a strategic prize. In 1517, the Ottoman Sultan Selim I launched a decisive campaign against the Mamluks. The Battle of Ridania, fought near Cairo, was a crushing defeat for the Mamluks. Despite their bravery, their traditional cavalry tactics were no match for the Ottoman army's superior artillery and firearms. Cairo fell, and with it, the Mamluk Sultanate. Egypt now became a province of the vast Ottoman Empire, governed by an Ottoman Pasha. This marked another significant shift in Egypt's long history of foreign rule. While still a vital part of a larger empire, Egypt's direct administrative and political center moved to Istanbul. The quiet pride of an independent Islamic state gave way to a provincial role, albeit an important one, within a much larger, multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire. For the next 3 centuries, Egypt remained under Ottoman suzerainty. The Ottomans maintained a relatively light administrative touch, often relying on local Mamluk Bey families to manage provincial affairs, while ensuring the flow of taxes and resources back to Istanbul. The agricultural wealth of Egypt, particularly grain, continued to be a crucial resource for the Ottoman state and its large armies. The quiet hum of Ottoman governance, a blend of central directives and local autonomy, shaped daily life. Culturally, Ottoman rule brought new architectural styles, particularly in Cairo, with the construction of mosques, fountains and other public buildings reflecting Ottoman aesthetics. Turkish, the language of the ruling elite, was introduced, though Arabic remained the lingua franca for the majority of the population. The quiet presence of Ottoman soldiers and administrators, their distinct costumes and customs, added another layer to Egypt's rich cultural tapestry. However, as the Ottoman Empire gradually entered a period of decline from the 17th century onwards, its control over distant provinces like Egypt began to weaken. The local Mamluk beys, who had been left in charge of much of the day-to-day administration, gradually asserted more and more autonomy, often engaging in fierce rivalries among themselves. Egypt became a de facto independent entity under Mamluk control, though it still nominally acknowledged Ottoman sovereignty and paid tribute. The quiet struggles for local power, the shifting alliances among the Mamluk factions, created a new kind of internal political turbulence. By the late 18th century, Egypt was a land of immense potential, but also significant internal divisions and external vulnerability. It was a prize that great powers eyed with increasing interest, particularly in Europe. The stage was set for another dramatic intervention, one that would once again shake Egypt from its long-held patterns and propel it into the modern age. That intervention came in 1798, with the arrival of a brilliant and ambitious young general from France, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, with his grand vision of an Eastern empire, saw Egypt as a strategic stepping stone to India, a means to disrupt British trade routes and strike a blow at his primary adversary. His expedition was not just a military venture, it was a scientific and cultural undertaking, bringing with him a large contingent of scholars, scientists and artists. The quiet, scholarly curiosity that accompanied the thunder of cannons would paradoxically unlock many of Egypt's ancient secrets. Napoleon's invasion was swift and initially successful. His forces decisively defeated the Mamluk armies, who were still relying on outdated cavalry tactics at the Battle of the Pyramids. Imagine the clash of muskets and cannons against Mamluk swords and lances, the ancient monuments standing silent witness to a new kind of warfare. Cairo fell, and Napoleon established French control over much of Egypt. The quiet dignity of Mamluk rule, however decentralized, was shattered by the arrival of a modern European army. The French occupation was brief, lasting only 3 years, but its impact was profound and far-reaching. It exposed Egypt to Western ideas, technology, and military organization, sparking a quiet yet fundamental shift in Egyptian society and its understanding of the wider world. The scholars who accompanied Napoleon conducted extensive studies of ancient Egypt, meticulously documenting its monuments, flora, and fauna. This intellectual effort culminated in the monumental Description de l'Égypte, a multi-volume work that laid the foundation for modern Egyptology. Crucially, it was during this expedition that the Rosetta Stone was discovered, a seemingly innocuous slab of granodiorite inscribed with a decree in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, demotic, and ancient Greek. It would provide the key to deciphering ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, unlocking millennia of lost history and allowing the world to finally read the quiet whispers of the pharaohs. This discovery, a silent linguistic triumph, reverberated across the intellectual landscape of Europe, igniting a fervent fascination with ancient Egypt that continues to this day. However, Napoleon's grand ambitions in Egypt were ultimately thwarted. The British, led by Admiral Horatio Nelson, destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, effectively stranding Napoleon's army. The French forces, plagued by disease, constant Mamluk and Ottoman resistance, and a lack of supplies, were eventually forced to withdraw in 1801. The quiet dream of a French Eastern Empire faded into the desert winds. Despite its brevity, the French occupation had irrevocably altered the course of Egyptian history. It highlighted the country's military and technological backwardness compared to Europe, and it created a power vacuum that would soon be filled by a remarkable figure, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer in the Ottoman army sent to expel the French, was a man of extraordinary ambition and political acumen. In the chaotic aftermath of the French withdrawal, he skillfully played the various factions against each other, the remaining Mamluks, the Ottoman governors, and the religious leaders, gradually consolidating his power. By 1805, he had been recognized by the Ottoman Sultan as the Pasha of Egypt, though he would effectively rule as an independent monarch. His quiet yet ruthless rise to power marked the beginning of modern Egypt. Muhammad Ali initiated a sweeping program of modernization, transforming Egypt from a medieval backwater into a regional power. He understood that to survive in a world dominated by European empires, Egypt needed a strong, modern army and a centralized, efficient state. He quietly yet decisively eliminated the remaining Mamluk power. Famously massacring their leaders in the citadel of Cairo in 1811, thereby eradicating the last vestiges of a feudal system that had dominated Egypt for centuries and clearing the path for his reforms. With the Mamluks gone, Muhammad Ali was free to embark on his grand vision, the creation of a modern state capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the emerging powers of Europe. His modernization program was comprehensive and revolutionary, touching every aspect of Egyptian society. He recognized that military strength was paramount, and to that end he established a conscript army, training Egyptian fellahin, peasants, in modern European tactics, advised by French and Italian officers. He built a modern navy, constructed shipyards, and established military schools to train officers and engineers. This was not merely a military reform. It was a quiet social revolution, taking ordinary farmers and transforming them into a disciplined, effective fighting force. To finance this ambitious military-industrial complex, Muhammad Ali reformed the economy. He centralized land ownership, effectively making the state the primary landlord, and introduced cash crops, most notably long-staple cotton, which would become Egypt's main export and a critical commodity for European textile mills. He built factories for processing sugar, textiles and armaments, attempting to create an industrial base that would reduce Egypt's reliance on foreign imports. He improved irrigation systems, digging new canals and dams, ensuring greater agricultural productivity. Education was also a priority, with schools established to train government officials, doctors and engineers, many of whom were sent to Europe for specialized studies. The quiet hum of new machinery, the disciplined march of trained soldiers, and the eager scribbling of students filled the air, signaling a nation awakening. Muhammad Ali's modern army proved its worth in a series of successful campaigns. He crushed the Wahhabi rebellion in Arabia, reclaiming the holy cities of Mecca and Medina for the Ottoman Sultan, thereby solidifying his own prestige within the Ottoman Empire. He conquered Sudan, extending Egyptian influence far south along the Nile and securing new sources of manpower and resources. Later, at the request of the Sultan, he sent his son Ibrahim Pasha to aid the Ottomans in suppressing the Greek War of Independence, where the Egyptian forces demonstrated their superior organization and training. The quiet prowess of Egyptian arms was now recognized across the region. However, Muhammad Ali's ambitions extended beyond mere loyalty to Istanbul. He envisioned an independent Egypt, the heart of a vast empire encompassing the Levant and perhaps even parts of Anatolia. His most significant challenge to Ottoman authority came in the 1830s, when his forces, led by Ibrahim Pasha, successfully invaded Ottoman Syria and pushed deep into Anatolia, posing a direct threat to the Ottoman capital itself. The quiet but undeniable march of Egyptian power sent shockwaves through the European chancelleries, who feared the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the disruption of the delicate balance of power in the East. The European powers, particularly Great Britain and France, viewed Muhammad Ali's growing independence and strength with a mixture of admiration and alarm. Britain, ever watchful over its trade routes to India, could not tolerate a strong, potentially hostile power controlling the strategic land bridge of Egypt and the Levant. After much diplomatic maneuvering and a show of naval force, the European powers intervened. In 1840, they compelled Muhammad Ali to withdraw from Syria and significantly reduce his army and navy. The Convention of London in 1840 and the subsequent Firman of 1841 cemented Muhammad Ali's position as hereditary ruler of Egypt under Ottoman suzerainty, ensuring that his family would govern Egypt, but effectively curtailing his imperial ambitions and bringing Egypt firmly into the European sphere of influence. This was a quiet yet profound compromise. Egypt gained dynastic continuity, but its strategic autonomy was significantly constrained. Muhammad Ali, a titan of his age, had brought Egypt into the modern world, but at the cost of binding its future to the whims of European powers. He passed away in 1849, leaving behind a legacy of transformative change and a dynasty that would rule Egypt for over a century. His successors, though not possessing his same vision or ruthlessness, continued the process of modernization, albeit often at great cost. Abbas I, his grandson, was a more conservative ruler, wary of European influence. Said Pasha, his son, was more open to Western ideas and was instrumental in granting the concession for the construction of the Suez Canal to the French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps in 1854. The Suez Canal, a colossal engineering feat that would connect the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, cutting thousands of miles off the journey from Europe to Asia, became the defining project of this era. Its construction, primarily by Egyptian forced labor, corvée, began in 1859 and lasted for a decade. Imagine the quiet, arduous toil under the scorching sun, the immense human cost behind this global shortcut. The canal, opening in 1869 with lavish celebrations, was a triumph of engineering and a symbol of Egypt's emerging global importance. But it also became a financial millstone around the country's neck. Ismail Pasha, Said's nephew, who ruled from 1863 to 1879, was perhaps the most ambitious of Muhammad Ali's successors. He famously declared, "My country is no longer in Africa, we are now part of Europe." He poured vast sums of money into modernizing Egypt, building railways, telegraph lines, schools and hospitals, expanding Cairo and Alexandria with European-style boulevards and palaces. He sought to make Egypt a truly Europeanized state, securing greater autonomy from the Ottoman Empire and even acquiring the title of Khedive, a grander title than Pasha, in 1867. The quiet aspiration to join the ranks of European nations, to transform Egypt into a beacon of progress, drove his every decision. However, Ismail's grand vision came with an astronomical price tag. The lavish spending, combined with the cost of the Suez Canal shares and various wars in Sudan, plunged Egypt into massive debt. European banks, primarily British and French, eagerly lent money, but the interest payments quickly became unsustainable. By the mid-1870s, Egypt was on the brink of bankruptcy. To alleviate the financial crisis, Ismail was forced to sell Egypt's shares in the Suez Canal to the British government in 1875, a move that gave Britain significant control over this vital waterway. But even this was not enough. The quiet tightening of the European financial noose continued, leading to the establishment of dual control in 1876, where British and French officials effectively managed Egypt's finances to ensure repayment of its debts. This was a profound humiliation, a clear indication that Egypt, though nominally independent, was rapidly losing control of its own destiny. The growing European presence and the financial mismanagement sparked a wave of nationalist sentiment among the Egyptian people, particularly within the army. Colonel Ahmed Urabi, a native Egyptian officer, emerged as a charismatic leader of a movement demanding an end to foreign interference and greater constitutional governance. The Urabi Revolt of 1881-1882 was a direct challenge to Khedive Tewfik, Ismail's son and successor, and to the Anglo-French financial control. The quiet murmurs of discontent had grown into a passionate roar for national dignity. The Urabi Revolt provided Great Britain with the pretext it needed. Fearing for its strategic interests, particularly the Suez Canal, and wary of French intentions, Britain intervened militarily. In 1882, British forces decisively defeated Urabi's army at the Battle of Tel el-Kebir. With this victory, the British occupied Egypt. The quiet determination of a nationalist movement was crushed under the might of the British Empire. The British occupation of Egypt, initially presented as a temporary measure to restore order and protect financial interests, would last for nearly 70 years. Egypt remained nominally a part of the Ottoman Empire, and the Khedive continued to be the official ruler, but real power now lay with the British Consul General, Lord Cromer, and the vast British administrative machinery. This was a period of subtle yet pervasive colonial rule. The quiet authority of the British, managing everything from finances to irrigation, effectively turned Egypt into a de facto British protectorate. Under British administration, Egypt saw significant improvements in governance and infrastructure. Lord Cromer, a firm believer in fiscal prudence, stabilized the economy, repaid much of the national debt, and embarked on large-scale irrigation projects, most notably the construction of the Aswan Low Dam, to expand agricultural land and boost cotton production. Education and healthcare also saw some advances, though often with an emphasis on serving British interests. The quiet efficiency of British bureaucracy, its focus on order and economic extraction, brought a new kind of stability to Egypt. However, these benefits came at a heavy cost. Egyptian national aspirations were suppressed, and the country's resources were primarily geared towards serving the British Empire. Egyptians were largely excluded from higher administrative positions which were reserved for British officials. The British, while preserving some aspects of Egyptian culture and religion, viewed their role as civilizing and superior, fostering a deep sense of resentment among the educated Egyptian elite and the growing middle class. The quiet dignity of a proud nation felt increasingly affronted by the patronizing hand of foreign rule. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 dramatically altered Egypt's political status. As the Ottoman Empire sided with the Central Powers against Britain, London formally declared Egypt a British protectorate, effectively ending Ottoman suzerainty and installing Hussein Kamil, another son of Ismail, as Sultan of Egypt, replacing the Khedive. This was a quiet yet definitive severing of centuries-old ties, solidifying Egypt's place within the British Empire. During the war, Egypt became a crucial base for British operations in the Middle East, with large numbers of British and Commonwealth troops stationed in the country. Egyptian resources and manpower were heavily utilized, further fueling nationalist discontent. The end of the war brought a surge of hope for independence, especially with President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points advocating for national self-determination. Saad Zaghloul, a charismatic lawyer and politician, emerged as the leader of the Wafd Party, which demanded full Egyptian independence. In 1919, his attempts to present these demands at the Paris Peace Conference were met with British refusal and his arrest, sparking the 1919 revolution, a widespread popular uprising across Egypt. The quiet desire for freedom exploded into widespread protests, strikes and riots, involving men and women from all social strata. The British, surprised by the intensity and scale of the uprising, were forced to make concessions. After years of negotiations and continued nationalist pressure, Britain unilaterally declared Egypt an independent sovereign state in 1922, ending the protectorate. However, this independence was far from complete. Britain reserved certain rights, including control over Egypt's foreign policy, defense, the Suez Canal, and the protection of foreign interests and minorities. The quiet but firm grip of British influence remained. Egypt became a constitutional monarchy, with King Fuad I, the former sultan, ascending the throne. A new constitution was adopted, establishing a parliamentary system. The Wafd Party, led by Zaghloul, dominated early parliamentary elections, reflecting the strong nationalist sentiment. However, the period between 1922 and 1952 was marked by a complex interplay of forces. The Egyptian monarchy, often seeking to expand its own power, the Wafd Party, striving for full independence, and the British, subtly but powerfully, manipulating events to safeguard their strategic interests. The quiet struggle for genuine sovereignty continued, often erupting into political crises and popular unrest. The most significant symbol of lingering British control was the Suez Canal and the continued presence of British troops in the canal zone. The Anglo-Egyptian Treaty of 1936 attempted to address some of these issues, allowing Britain to maintain troops in the canal zone for the defense of the waterway, but also paving the way for Egypt to join the League of Nations and assume greater international responsibility. This treaty, however, did not satisfy the fervent nationalist desire for complete British withdrawal. World War II once again placed Egypt in a critical strategic position. Though officially neutral, Egypt was effectively an Allied base, its territory becoming a crucial battleground in the North African campaign against the Axis powers. The British military presence expanded dramatically, and Egyptian resources were again mobilized for the war effort. The quiet tension of living under foreign occupation, even amidst a global war, weighed heavily on the Egyptian populace. The war highlighted Egypt's vulnerability and further intensified calls for true independence. After the war, the demand for the complete evacuation of British troops and the full integration of Sudan with Egypt, a unity of the Nile Valley under the Egyptian crown, became the dominant issues in Egyptian politics. Negotiations with Britain repeatedly stalled, leading to increasing frustration and a rise in anti-British sentiment. Violent clashes between British forces and Egyptian nationalists became more frequent. The quiet resentment of decades of foreign control was boiling over. The political system of the constitutional monarchy, perceived as corrupt and subservient to both the British and the monarchy's own interests, began to lose legitimacy. The ruling Wafd Party, once the vanguard of nationalism, was increasingly seen as ineffective. Meanwhile, other political forces emerged, including the Muslim Brotherhood, an influential Islamist movement, and various communist and socialist groups. A pivotal moment came in 1948 with the Arab-Israeli War. Egypt, along with other Arab states, suffered a humiliating defeat against the newly established State of Israel. This military debacle was a profound shock to the Egyptian psyche. exposing the weakness and corruption within the army and government. The quiet shame of defeat, the perception of incompetence at the highest levels, further eroded public trust in the existing regime. Young nationalistic officers, many of whom had fought in the war and felt betrayed by their leadership, began to organize in secret. This group of officers, known as the Free Officers Movement, was led by a charismatic colonel named Gamal Abdel Nasser. They were driven by a potent mix of Arab nationalism, anti-imperialism, and a desire for social justice. They believed that Egypt could only achieve its true potential by overthrowing the corrupt monarchy and expelling the last vestiges of British influence. The quiet plotting of these young officers, their clandestine meetings, laid the groundwork for a radical transformation. On July 23, 1952, the Free Officers launched a swift and bloodless coup. They seized control of strategic points in Cairo, including army headquarters, government buildings, and the radio station. King Farouk, the last monarch of Egypt, was given an ultimatum and forced to abdicate in favor of his infant son, Ahmed Fuad II, before being sent into exile. The quiet revolution, executed with precision and minimal violence, signaled the end of the Muhammad Ali dynasty and the monarchy that had ruled Egypt for 150 years. Initially, a Revolutionary Command Council, RCC, governed the country, ostensibly maintaining a civilian facade. General Mohammed Naguib, a senior officer, was made president and prime minister, but the real power quickly consolidated around Gamal Abdel Nasser. In 1953, the monarchy was formally abolished and Egypt was declared a republic. Naguib was soon sidelined, and by 1954, Nasser had fully consolidated his power as the undisputed leader of Egypt. The quiet assumption of power by a new generation of leaders marked a profound ideological shift for the nation. Nasser's rise ushered in a new era of Egyptian history, often called the Nasserist era. He was a fervent advocate of Arab nationalism and pan-Arabism, envisioning Egypt at the heart of a unified Arab world, free from foreign domination and internal corruption. His government embarked on a program of land reform, nationalized industries, and invested heavily in education and social welfare programs, aiming to create a more equitable society. The quiet promises of a brighter, more independent future resonated deeply with the masses. However, it was Nasser's foreign policy that truly defined his leadership and projected Egypt onto the global stage. He became a leading voice of the non-aligned movement during the Cold War, advocating for a third path independent of both American and Soviet blocs. He was a vocal opponent of Western imperialism and a staunch supporter of Palestinian rights. The most dramatic moment of Nasser's early presidency came in 1956, with the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company. This bold move, seizing control of the vital waterway from its British and French owners, was an assertion of Egyptian sovereignty that electrified the Arab world and infuriated the former colonial powers. The quiet act of nationalization, delivered with a powerful speech, challenged the remnants of colonial power and sparked an international crisis. Britain, France, and Israel responded with a coordinated military invasion of Egypt known as the Suez Crisis. Their aim was to reclaim the canal and overthrow Nasser. Israeli forces invaded the Sinai Peninsula, while British and French paratroopers landed in the canal zone. The quiet calm of the region was shattered by the thunder of warplanes and the rumble of tanks. However, the intervention was met with fierce international condemnation, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union, both of whom saw the Anglo-French-Israeli action as a dangerous relic of colonialism. Under intense diplomatic pressure, the invading forces were compelled to withdraw. Nasser, despite the military setback, emerged from the crisis as a triumphant hero, a symbol of Arab pride and resistance against Western imperialism. The quiet victory on the diplomatic stage solidified his position as a preeminent leader in the developing world. Following the Suez Crisis, Nasser deepened his ties with the Soviet Union, receiving significant military and economic aid, most notably for the construction of the Aswan High Dam. This monumental project, completed in 1970, created Lake Nasser, one of the world's largest artificial lakes, and provided Egypt with vital hydroelectric power and extensive new irrigation for agriculture. The quiet transformation of the Nile's flow, harnessing its power for modern development, was a testament to Nasser's vision for national progress. Nasser's dream of pan-Arab unity briefly materialized in 1958 with the formation of the United Arab Republic, UAR, a political union between Egypt and Syria. However, this union proved short-lived, dissolving in 1961 due to political differences and Syrian discontent with Egyptian dominance. The quiet hope of a united Arab nation, though deeply felt, was ultimately overcome by the complexities of regional politics. The core of Nasser's vision, however, continued to focus on a strong, independent Egypt, leading the Arab world. This vision, unfortunately, led to another devastating conflict. In 1967, tensions between Egypt and Israel escalated dramatically, fueled by border skirmishes, an Egyptian blockade of the Straits of Tiran, and the withdrawal of UN peacekeeping forces from the Sinai. Nasser, under immense pressure from Arab public opinion, gambled on a military confrontation. The result was the Six-Day War, a catastrophic defeat for Egypt and its Arab allies. In a swift and decisive offensive, Israel destroyed the Egyptian Air Force on the ground, captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, and inflicted heavy losses on the Egyptian army. The quiet confidence built since Suez was utterly shattered, replaced by profound shock and national mourning. Nasser, accepting responsibility, offered to resign, but immense popular demonstrations compelled him to remain in power. The post-1967 period was one of quiet rebuilding and diplomatic maneuvering. Nasser focused on rebuilding the Egyptian military, preparing for a war of attrition against Israel, even as he continued to seek a political solution to the conflict. He passed away suddenly in 1970 at the height of his efforts, leaving behind a complex legacy of immense popular appeal, bold leadership, national pride, and tragic military defeat. His successor was Anwar Sadat, a former free officer and Nasser's vice president. Sadat initially maintained a low profile, but he soon embarked on a dramatic reorientation of Egyptian policy, both domestically and internationally. He moved to dismantle Nasser's socialist policies, opening up the economy to greater private sector involvement and re-establishing closer ties with the West. The quiet shift away from Nasser's ideological path was subtle at first, but would prove profound. Crucially, Sadat recognized that the no peace, no war stalemate with Israel was unsustainable for Egypt.